Today is Wednesday, June 15th, 2011. I'm Matthew Tietje.
I'm Steve Stanley.
Yo soy Heath Mullikin.
And I'm Tony Casey. Welcome to the Techology Show, a weekly podcast featuring technology, theology, and everything in between. The world's only user-antagonistic podcast. This is episode 112. Ooh. Well, Heath whipping out the second language there.
That's exactly right.
All right, Heath, so give us the commentary. The Mavs do it in 6.
Let me tell you, no one, well, no one was more shocked than me, maybe except for LeBron James and the rest of the crew. But what a great, that's probably the best NBA Finals I've seen in a long time. It was also the first NBA Finals I'd seen in a long time because the last 14 years, the Finals have been going on while I was at youth camp. And so I wasn't at youth camp this year, so it was nice to watch every game. That was really great.
Yeah, so I did not get to see any of the games. Had to just read stuff like that, see a video clip or two. But it seems to me, you tell me, you paid attention, throughout the playoffs this year, this is the first time in a few years, I think, that you watch one man who carried a team. Yeah.
And the cool thing was, I believe it was game 4 when Dirk was sick and they won.
Yeah, had that fever.
The first half, you know, when he was sick, there were some other guys who stepped up. And even in game 6, you know, first half, Dirk's 1 for 12. And Jason Terry was just, I think Jason Terry was something like 7 for 9, 8 for 10 the first half. And so other guys stepped up. You got to love Dirk. He's 1 for 12 in the first half. Comes out, first time, he just kept shooting. Yeah. And it's like, you almost wish somebody would have sat down. I mean, at some point in the series, you got to sit down. The Heat coach, Spoelstra's got to sit down. It's like, if your last name's not James, Bosch, or Wade, you do not shoot the ball. If you get the ball, you pass the ball. You set a pick for one of these 3 guys, and that's it. It's like just as Dirk would not stop shooting, wouldn't give up, LeBron wouldn't start shooting. He'd get within 5 feet of the lane and pass to Juwan Howard, who's almost as old as you, Tony.
Oh, thank you there, Heath.
Whoa.
Well, that was a slam.
Whoa.
And no, you're better than Juwan Howard. You have a better low post game. At this point, Tony, you have a better low post game than LeBron James.
Yeah, I would like to believe that, but it's not true. All right. Well, it was. I think people. I don't know if they were rooting for the Mavs, but they were certainly rooting against the Heat.
Well, you've heard the thing this week, the Cavs for Mavs, where there are lots of revs for Mavs as well. But I switched halfway through.
What do you think about the Miami Herald?
They got it wrong. They put it was a Macy's ad with Heat championship T-shirts in it.
No.
That ran the day after.
Congratulating them. Too.
Yes.
Oh no. I guess that's an epic fail, right?
I don't know.
Epic fail.
All right. Hey, listen. We
worth
have
money in a few years.
It will be. Yeah. We have with us this morning, all the way from Tegucigalpa, Lisa Anderson-Umana. Good morning, Lisa.
Good morning.
All right. Just for those of you that don't know Lisa, let me tell you a little bit about her. She grew up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And Lisa, I want you to know, I'm wearing my Packers shirt this morning. Take from that whatever you want to.
Take it off. Take it off.
No.
That's the first on the Techology Show.
If you knew what was under that, you wouldn't say that.
You know, guys, this happens to me all the time.
And here comes the Ustream
people
bot.
1,000 miles away call in and say, take it off.
Yeah, Heath's right. Here comes the Ustream bot. Yeah. In 1982, Lisa graduated from Penn State University, where she studied health and physical education. In 1993, she received a master's in educational ministries from Wheaton College. She's currently working on her PhD at Trinity International University. In 1983, Lisa started working with Latin American Mission, was stationed in Mexico, and has been involved in Christian camping ever since. She is married to Alfredo, and together they have 2 wonderful children, Valerie, who is 11, and Victor, who is 9. Thanks so much for being with us, Lisa. Now, currently, you are working with Christian Camping International, and I know a lot of people don't know what that is, so let's just begin right there. Explain to our listeners what Christian Camping International is.
Christian Camping International is an alliance. It's a worldwide alliance, and so there are. It's called CCI, is what we call it, and it's all over the world. So we have a CCI in Jamaica and Brazil and Canada, the USA, Korea, Japan. There's about 19 associations all around the world, and they're each autonomous, but we're kind of loosely knit together. We have the same faith statement, and we have kind of the same goal of really shaping the lives of those who, equipping those who shape the lives of campers. And so whether they're campers in Russia or campers in Korea, or in my case, I'm with Latin America Mission. So each association has a different flavor. For instance, camping in Latin America is done predominantly by churches. It's mostly, there's not as many campsites as would be the case in the USA. The USA's got at least 1,000 that are members of the CCI USA, as well as equal number or more who are members of American Camping Association, the ACA. So you've got more campsites are the ones doing the camping in the United States, whereas in Latin America, we can basically use a park or someone's beach property, or do a campsite, find a campsite. Our role is to encourage and to teach the churches and parachurch organizations to do camping, because it's not part of the culture here in Latin America. Whereas in the States, I went to camp when I was a kid. I went to camp when I was a kid.
There you go.
And so it's very common. In Latin America, that wouldn't be the case. It's not something that's common at all.
So how did you get started with Christian camping?
Basically, I went to I remember I went to a CCI convention back in '82. I just graduated from Penn State. My pastor said, "You're going to like this group of people," and I had just come back from a summer, graduated from Penn State in '82. I worked the summer at a camp, a Christian camp, and it was like I found the perfect marriage between my love as a PE teacher for recreation and my love for Christ in terms of discipling people. I found the perfect match in camping, in Christian camping. And so when I went back to Pittsburgh, there was one in the same state, and I walked in, and I remember looking around, I remember meeting people, and I remember thinking, oh my gosh, these people are talking the same thing that I just lived over the summer. And I remember thinking, I found myself. I mean, it was one of those amazing experiences where I just said, these people there's a whole organization. It's not just me that finds this perfect marriage between the love of recreation and play and games and then the love of the Lord. So after that, when I became a missionary in '83, the reason I became a missionary is because I wanted to, the job that was offered to me through Latin America Mission was working at a camp in Mexico. And I thought, hey, you can be a missionary and a camper. And so it was the kind of feeling I thought, wow, that's wonderful. So right away I looked up Christian Camping International in Latin America. And so I became a member and started to attend the conferences, and basically several years later I became a part of the structure of Christian Camping International in Latin America.
Well, I think any of us that know you, Lisa, know that it seems to be just a perfect match of giftedness and call. It really is who you are. What do you think can be accomplished through camping that might not otherwise happen in other settings, or just a normal local church setting?
I think there's the whole phenomenon of what they call temporary system. We call it in our Christian circles, it's kind of a temporary Christian community that's formed. Typically, where people's lives are impacted, it requires oftentimes some sense of moving away from the routine, moving away from many times the distractions, things that tend to cause you to not really be available to the Lord and to listen to His voice. So that's one thing, is that it's a temporary community, Christian community. So that means that people are available. We usually talk about in our CCI circles that it's an ideal place to actually build or rebuild your relationships, your 4 relationships that were broken at the fall. Your relationship with the Lord, your relationship with yourself, your relationship with others, and your relationship with God's creation.
Wow, that's good.
So it's the temporary community. It's the fact that you can really work and focus on those 4 relationships. There's also just the fact that you're in God's creation tends to have, I mean, even the environmentalists have discovered that. I mean, even anyone recognizes that being in the midst of God's creation, there's a sense of majesty. There's a sense of an awareness of his character, almost an awe. I was watching my kids the other day playing, and they were watching squirrels, and they were smiling. Like, there's this automatic, you see something from God's creation, and it's almost this involuntary smile that gets on your face. So that's sort of the setting in and of itself tends to be very conducive to what we call a growth environment. It just tends to stimulate people to think thoughts or to be open to others or to God in a way that just doesn't happen in Sunday school or in like a sermon setting or even in the home setting. So that setting apart was also something you saw the Lord do in terms of, would set himself apart on a regular basis to commune with the Father.
Yeah, I wonder, Lisa, you go to the Old Testament especially, and when significant things happened in the Old Testament, whether it be Abraham's trip, to the Promised Land or Jacob wrestling with the angel, there was this thing of standing stones, or where they would erect a monument, and it stands as a reminder of God doing something significant at that place in their lives. Do you think that there's a correlation here with Christian camping, this idea that I go to a place and I get away, I'm in God's creation, and that place can actually become maybe a metaphor or symbolic in their life?
I think it has both the symbolic value and the real physical value, because you're at a place in time and physical, as well as emotionally or inside of you, internally, you're at a place. And oftentimes, it's interesting you mentioned that effect, that they would actually build a monument or pile of stones or something. One of the activities we often do to mark a child's decision or an adult's decision is we ask them to kind of build a sculpture, we call it, using articles from nature. And it's been really cool because I've been back to camps with kids and young people and people who become counselors, and they'll walk me back and they'll say, you know what happened at this tree? Or you know what happened at this rock? And the fact that there's a physical symbol there, their sculpture has usually been washed away or, carted away somewhere, but they attached the fact that it was a real place. It wasn't just something that happened in their head.
Yeah.
And that's a powerful use of symbolism that you see throughout the Old Testament.
I know when we were at our big Wesleyan gathering back in January, Mark Batterson was speaking one night. He talked about how he got a photographer to go with him to the wilderness, I guess in Wisconsin, where he had been called to ministry, and took pictures so his kids would know. And that's something, this summer is 20 years since I was called to ministry, and I still remember that camp and the field I was sitting in. And you're absolutely right. I think that's why, we're getting ready into youth camp season right here. And there is a difference between camp and camping, but I think, I've seen people come back for family camp, and maybe they've been out of youth ministry for a decade, but they'll come back to family camp and get their life turned around because that's a special place for them, and they remember the commitment they made as a teen. And you're right, it's just so significant because when people connect with nature and they connect with God, it's almost like it brands your brain, and you always remember that special place.
Lisa, I
remember. Oh,
go ahead.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was listening when I was studying. I was at Willow Creek one time, and I remember Bill Hybels started talking about how he went back 20 years later to the camp and the place on the hill where he became a Christian when he was 17. And you just think about. I heard a sermon with Billy Graham once who talked about he was at Forest Home in California, and that's where he made the decision to go into full-time ministry. We had one time we interviewed Luis Palau from Argentina, and he talked about the counselor who he said every night the counselor would take one kid, it was tent camping, and sit down on a log with him and say, you need to make a decision about your life. Are you going to follow Jesus or not? And he's like, oh my gosh. It was like the last night, and it was his turn. And again, it was the counselor had a unique opportunity to speak into his life. And I guess that's the other thing, is that it doesn't just impact the camper, like the fact that we target campus for campers, but the whole chain of people who are involved in it. The camp counselors also have a significant, they're at an age where socially it's important for them to engage with others as they do something bigger than themselves. And so what oftentimes we see the biggest impact in the core of counselors who are investing there. In our case, it might be just a long weekend. In the States, you've got the whole summer, university kids. But in fact, their lives are oftentimes the most impacted because of the friends that they meet. Obviously, you have a lot of eventual spouses, but the social engagement with others of saying we're involved in something bigger than ourselves, they end up being just as impacted or more than the campers that they're serving.
Wonder if you could give us an example of a life that's been impacted through CCI.
CCI Latin America, let's see. I'll think of someone in Argentina, and this would typify many people who work at camps where there's. I need to make a clarification. Most camping in Latin America tends to happen kind of by in improv. They tend to have their doctorates in improvisation, like we would call it flying by the seat of your pants. And so many times camp takes place kind of like, okay, we're going to go out there and we'll figure out what our schedule is, once we get out there. So one of the influences of Christian Camping International has been able to say, let's really teach people how to do camping and how to use principles of ministering to people. So this one young lady, she had been a camper, and what happened was she heard a counselor talk about a testimony about how she had been very deeply hurt as a young lady by someone in her family, and she alluded to the fact she was only about 12 at the time. So when she heard the testimony, she kind of knew that she was talking about the fact that the counselor had been sexually abused. And so, at the campfire, we didn't go into the raw details or anything of it, but she went back to the cabin that night, and lo and behold, a number of the kids that night began to share how they had suffered similar experiences. And so for the first time, she told me, Patricia, she said she looked around and she said, oh my gosh, other people have suffered what I've suffered. So she had a moment in time where she could share what it was that had happened to her, and she equally had been abused when she was a little girl by a family member. And so the counselor had gone through all the camp counselors had gone through like a training session where we talked. None of them were professional counselors per se, but they had talked about and learned with their own life the principles of forgiveness and healing. And so the counselor was able to set time aside to be able to talk with Patricia on an individual basis and talk about the power of forgiveness and being able to let go of the resentment, and then was able to talk about the concepts of the Lord healing, the emotional pain that was involved. And so she later became, as life went on, she kept returning to camp, and she later became a counselor, a camp counselor, and so she was working with us. And so it was amazing because her testimony, the way she was able to address that, was really an avenue where many campers were also allowed to kind of get in touch with the fact that they had painful experiences. And so now she works within her church and is a leader, and so she kind of went up through the ranks. And unfortunately, that experience of her being abused is a very, very common experience. There's been there's been a lot of studies done, and one of them talked about it was a church study done within the ranks of the church, and it says 82% of the people sitting on the benches at the church or the pews, 82% have had a negative sexual experience as a child.
Wow.
And
That's
those
incredible.
numbers just mean that you're dealing with a very wounded population, a population that suffered a lot of pain.
Question about the impact of the economic status of the people. And I know when I pastored in Wyoming and out west and other places, the kids were so embedded in the life of the ranch that many times when the city kids were going to camps and so forth, they weren't able to because they were needed on the ranch. Mm-hmm. Does this happen in Honduras? And do you notice any of this? And do you accommodate the seasonal aspect of perhaps the agricultural labor that they do?
Basically, what we end up working with a population that tends to be more middle class.
Okay.
In terms of the general, what happens is in the rural area, when you organize events, you basically have to be an organization that has 100% subsidy. Because the fact that you actually have to give them all scholarships, and even though for a general long weekend 4-day camp or something you might be paying $50, $60, $70, that's prohibitive for the large majority of people. So what you've got is you have the general church population, First Baptist and just Presbyterian, Pentecostal, Assembly of God. They would basically it would be generally middle upper, middle lower, because more or less their population can pull together enough money to do camping. And then you've got a number of ministries that some of them are from the States and from around the world that work in these countries. And they're the ones who tend to have the subsidies to be able to go flat out, very poor, very rural population. So because most of the population in Latin America is in the cities, that would be, you've got some of the countries you're looking at upwards of 80%, 70-80% are in urban centers. And so you don't have, this huge amount of population in the rural area. Camping tends to be done more in the urban setting, for those than going out to different campsites.
I want to return to the statistic you were talking about earlier. You said 82% have had a negative sexual experience as kids or as young people. So I just imagine one of the goals that you have in Christian camping is you are creating a safe place.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
We have there's the camps that we organize tend to have the counselors have to go through. We have training courses. Christian Camping International Latin America has training courses that last essentially 10 weeks long. They're every week on Saturday. There's a 4-hour training session, and then 2 of the weekends are like practice camps. And the first weekend camp is essentially, let's have you be a camper, because again, we're working with populations that for whom camping is not in their background. So we want them to be a camper, and we bring in, we call them model counselors, and they're their counselors for the weekend, and they get to experience what it's like. You're talking full, adults or young people who've never been to camp. So that first weekend is an incredible, it's an experience that tends to mark their lives. Then then towards the end of the counselor training course, they then they kind of practice on one another. So this training, what it does is it allows there to be a very good level of competency, and I guess character development is the main thing. When I started doing camping in Mexico, my assumption was we would go to the churches and we would say, I worked at a campsite, and we say, can you send us, your mature young people who are in the youth group and stuff, and have them be counselors, and we'll just kind of take a weekend, more or less, and prep them and bring them up to speed. Well, we were blown away at the low level of just discipled lives. I mean, these were kids who had grown up in the church, and it was pathetic. I mean, we just, you know, their life in terms of growing and knowing what it meant to practice any of the spiritual disciplines was just null. And so we thought, oh my gosh, we've made a wrong assumption. We need to have a formative edge to our training that talks about character development and talks about issues of honesty and integrity and in a spiritual walk. And so that kind of that experience where the child with a large population of the campers was sexually abused, that marked my life. That happened in '87. And, you know, almost 4 years after I'd been on the field, I said, I will never organize a camp where a child who comes through these gates won't have the opportunity to say something hurts. And whether, you know, to create a space for them where they feel safe, where they have a counselor who's also been ministered to, and who can give what the Lord, you know, from the healing that they've received. So that changed my whole philosophy of camping. And so we saw the camper evaluations go from the 83, 84, 85, 86 to where they would be like, oh, we had a great time on the slide, and it was so much fun, and oh my gosh, you know, what an exciting time, to 87, 88, where they were beginning to say, I was hurting, and I feel God's healing. Wow. Like, I felt healed. I forgave my father. I forgave my uncle. I forgave my brother. Like, the evaluations began to reflect this whole transformation that we had in our approach to training the counselors and forming them. So when I left Camp Quicoten in Mexico, those are the training manuals that I took with me to CCI to work, and then they became our basic training manuals that we published then through CCI and was able to distribute them throughout Latin America. So we're in 11 different countries here in Latin America.
If we have listeners out there that you've really piqued their interest, where can they go to find out more about Christian Camping International?
Well, it depends on the country they're in. If they're in if they're in the USA, they can find out that it's ccca.org. And so that's for the CCI USA. For if they speak Spanish, for the CCI Latin America, they'd go to CCIAL America Latina.org, and that's where they could find more information.
We actually had two questions from in the chat room. One was, do you guys have anything going on in Euro? And also, what part of Honduras are you in right now?
I live in Tegucigalpa, Honduras, the capital of Honduras, Tegucigalpa. And Euro as in European Union type thing? Is that your question?
No, it is.
YORO is what they...
Oh, Yoro.
Yeah, my
most of us,
Yoro.
Yeah, Yoro.
Yoro.
Yoro, that means, yeah. The way you pronounce it in Spanish with your southern accent, it meant to cry, and so I thought who's crying here. So Yoro is.
Many people do that when he speaks
We don't
Spanish.
have a group in Yoro, Honduras, right now. But we often travel to the cities. We're mostly right now in Cofradía, in San Pedro Sula, in Cihuatepeque, and Tegucigalpa. Those are kind of the four main cities. But if this person knows someone who'd be interested in Christian camping that works in Yoro, they could, I'm sure you have my email or something up there. They could write me, and we could get someone to contact them, because we have a number of instructors who will travel to the different areas in Honduras and offer training.
Yeah, I can put that in the chat room if someone is interested in your email contact. Lisa, I want to take just a different turn here and go away from the Christian camping and talk about something that's very personal in your life. Now, on this show, we have talked about the issue of bioethics. It's just an ongoing theme here, and part of bioethics is what happens with pregnancies and people who can't get pregnant, and some of the things that they can now do technologically. We've had Paige Cunningham. She's the director of the Center for Bioethics. She's been on the show before, and one of the things that she says is that, you know, our science is outpacing our ethics. We're doing things, but we don't ask, should we be doing them? Now, about 3 years ago, you were just really vulnerable with a class I was in, and you shared with your colleagues your stories along this line, your personal story. And so I was wondering if you would just share that with our listeners.
Sure. Alfredo and I, after, I guess about a year after being married, we kind of tried to start getting pregnant. And it was odd because a year passed and then another year. And so we started to kind of do the investigation of, you know, what could be wrong. And basically, in my case, what we discovered was that I was premenopausal, which meant that basically my ovaries were like I was 60. I mean, there was, and so the doctor who I tried to get treatment in Costa Rica, and because we were living there at the time, and then went to the States, and they did a number of the treatments basically where you are just given shots to try to increase your, I don't want to get too technical, but your ovulation and trying to get pregnant that way. And at one point he finally said to me, "Look, Lisa, you're just never going to get pregnant, and it would be wrong for me to keep taking your money to continue to do these treatments. You just have to accept it." And I remember at that point in time, my husband was like, "Whoa," you know, we were just kind of blown away, and he said, "You basically have 1,000,000 to 1 chance of ever getting pregnant." And so at that point, we had, it was interesting because when we went through the route, before the good news, kind of the route of what is out there in terms of helping you make some of those ethical decisions, is that the only promo or information that you get is what comes from the clinic or the place that you're going to. So in our case, the doctor that was treating us for fertility was a complete atheist. And so he's, you know, we had talked to him about the fact that we were praying, and he kind of scoffed. And so any information that he gave us would be from a completely, you know, God wouldn't have anything to do with it. And then when we looked into some of the other alternatives, the only information that you're going to get are the ones who are going to be trying to promote the technology, what would be sperm donor or egg donor or you know, in vitro or some of those. So to me, there was a complete absence of any Christian perspective apart from, look, adoption is good. You know, there's a biblical basis of it. You know, that's kind of like just pray a lot or even wackier, you know, advice that you'd get from within the church. So to me, the hardest thing was really there was an absence of, other than like where's the source where you're going to go to look for that information. And when you're at that point in time, you're just kind of desperate, and so you have this focal point where you're like, okay, I want to get pregnant. And so when they offer you, well, you know, how about this advance or this approach, you're not even thinking ethics at the time, because that's not first and foremost. And so that's kind of the saddest thing that I discovered about the church, that there wasn't a whole lot of guidance provided, even though there were people who knew what situation we were in, but they weren't. Yeah. It was almost like this, oh, I can't really speak into you because I haven't suffered that, but there wasn't a voice. And so, well, the good news is basically after we stopped all, we basically came to a place where we had to go to a level of acceptance and of saying, okay, I think the biggest help for us was we were reading a book that talked about, I think it was called Adoption After Infertility. It wasn't a Christian book, but it suggested that we go through and we talk as a couple. Why is having biological biological children so important. And so we actually listed separately, and then we came together and we talked about the significance of it. Was it just wanting to be a mother? Was it carrying on the family name? Was it wanting to pass on the Lord to the next generation? What were the main things? And we actually sat down and we wrote a letter to the Lord. And we said, we being campers, we made a campfire. And we said, this is our altar. We're going to take all of our dreams and our aspirations, and we're going to renounce and relinquish them on the altar and just say, Lord, that the truth we're going to hold on to is that you have our best in mind.
Very good.
And that was kind of like our axiom. We said, this is the truth that we're going to hold on to no matter what happens. He has our best in mind. And so we're crying, and we burned the letter before the Lord, and so we came to a different level of acceptance where we just said he has our best in mind. And at one point my pastor had said, from a church where I grew up, said, reading Hebrews 11, and you look at them who say they strove and they fought and they were martyred and killed, but they never got the promise. They never received it on earth. And he said, I want to be that no matter what happened in my lifetime, I won't stand face to face to God and say, I'm resentful because you didn't do this and you didn't do that. And it was this cold hand of comfort that kind of slapped us off the backside of the head and just said, we don't want to be believers that are going to say, you didn't give us what you wanted. And so we said, we will accept this as something that you have as the best for us. A couple months later, literally, I started feeling kind of weird, and I thought, this is just kind of strange here. And I had one more doctor's appointment just for a checkup, and he did an ultrasound, and I remember he said to me, well, you won't be needing my help. And I remember thinking to myself, what are you talking about? I mean, I'm not here for that. What are you talking about? And he goes, you are 7 weeks pregnant with twins.
Wow.
Oh, yeah.
And it was one of those holy moments. Alfredo, I called him in and told him, and we were silent. For the next hour, I remember we walked out of the doctor's office, we went to a diner, and we sat down, and we were in tears, and we were like, this is a holy moment. God has sovereignly acted, and there's nothing that we've done, to deserve this.
Amen.
There's nothing that, and so it was just an amazing moment, and it ended up being that my daughter Valerie, her twin, she it was a vanishing twin, so she didn't, the twin didn't make it, wasn't born, but my daughter Valerie says she's looking forward to meeting her in heaven. And it just was one of those sovereign acts where I remember walking down the hallway of the hospital. I went up to the fertility doctor's office and I said, here's your 1,000,000 to 1. Here's your 1,000,000 to 1. This is, and I said, God answers prayers. And the guy, he said, maybe I'm misdiagnosed. So he didn't even believe at that. And so then about a year and a half later, we said, Lord, it seems kind of audacious to ask for a second miracle, but we would love to have another child. And, most people don't get one miracle this big in their life, and here we're asking for 2, but Lord, if it would be your will. And so about a week after I prayed that prayer again, I felt kind of weird. I thought, man, this lactation thing is kind of weird on me. But I went in and get a test, and lo and behold, the doctor did the ultrasound and said, you're 12 weeks pregnant. And we're like, holy smoke, we just blew through, the first trimester. And he takes out this little dial, and my husband and I are, and he's doing this. Oh, so, that if it's 12 weeks now, and he's doing the dial, and he says, it's probably conceived, this date. And both Alfredo and I looked at one another, and he goes, Lisa, you were in Mexico then. I was like, And the doctor's like, oh my gosh, I think let me check that again. And I mean, it was this funny. He said, I was in Honduras and you were in Mexico. Wait a second. And the doctor's like, I think I just got this numbers here. Let me fix this. So Victor was born then a year and a half after Valerie was born.
Can I also just share a little bit? My wife and I have been dealing with similar things. We had a miscarriage at the beginning of this year, right at the end of last year, and it was our right at 12 weeks, and it's just a very tough time for us. And in the same way, we've dealt with a lot of the same questions and moments that you're speaking of there. And just as another book to plug is one that Dustin Wilson, who listens to our show sometimes, let me know about, called Adopted for Life, by a guy named Russell Moore. I listened to it via the audio book of it, and there literally were moments where driving home, I was up in North Carolina at my parents'. I had to be up there for an afternoon, and was on the way home and listening to it and just breaking down into tears on the way back, being challenged by those very same questions. Why is this something that's so important to us? And it's a discussion that that my wife and I have had too, and I think a very good discussion that everybody with the label Christian should have. Every couple, what is the purpose and the reason behind our intentions for children? And this book was very powerful in the same way, and it went through a lot of the same things that you discussed. But I would highly recommend it to anybody that would have any kind of interest.
People just don't like the advice that you get. They don't ask that question because it seems like, we want children. Everyone wants children. And so it's interesting. No one kind of dares to talk about the ethics of all the technology that's available out there. It's just that people don't dare to tread there. So I'm so glad that you had Paige to kind of be there and talk about it and really press people to think about. Yeah.
Well, thanks for being so vulnerable on that. I mean, it's a very personal story, and your willingness to share that with our listeners is very much appreciated. All right.
Well, it's a miracle.
Lisa's going to stick with us for the rest of the show, and now we're going to turn to
Download of the Week.
All right, our download of the week. We're going to talk a little bit about your PowerPoint presentations and the pictures you choose for them.
Yeah. So Tony very rightly put this in the show notes again for us to cover. I believe we might have mentioned it before, but just something to reiterate. You had a opportunity while you were away the past couple of weeks to be in class, and while you were in class, you had somebody give a presentation where I guess it was pretty obvious that
just some of the pictures were taken from Google. People just go to Google and they search for images.
Right.
Yeah, and they were great images.
And do an image search, stuff like that. You can run into legality problems by doing that. In fact, Google, as you do that, if you're looking through images, you'll notice that they usually have a disclaimer when you click on an image that says this image may be copyrighted. You may want to check into that before you use it. We treat that with very much just disregard, don't really pay attention to that oftentimes. But there are avenues and resources to go down that will provide you images that are either Creative Commons licensed or open licensed for you to use in presentations, in even what am I trying to think of here? If you're like working on graphic stuff for a church series or something like that, you can find stock photography that can be used for a very reasonable $0.
Yeah.
So we just want to highlight a few of those. I'm trying to turn here to my show notes here. One of them, Flickr, is a great image repository where people upload stuff. Not everything there, though, is available that way. When you search on Flickr, you need to do an advanced search and be sure to click on only search for Creative Commons licensed photos, and that will pull up ones that you can use. In a social site like Flickr is, it's always best if you give some sort of wow. That was awesome.
Well, Lisa's eating Triscuits over in Honduras.
Okay. Anyways, Yeah, in a social site like that, particularly where you can comment on an image, it's always nice to give attribution or to say, hey, thank you for making this image available. I wanted to let you know I used it and let them know how. Then you've got Wikimedia Commons. Anything that's on Wikipedia, particularly like if there's an article with a picture in it, that image is in the same way as Creative Commons license. So what Wikimedia Commons is the place where all of those images that Wikipedia and all the other wiki sites that run in the same company, basically, are stored there, and it's got a great image search where you can look for stuff and find some great materials there. You can pull anything from that and use it. And then there's the stock exchange, sxc.hu. That has got also just a great repository of images that can be easily searched through and found. It's one that I frequent a lot. Now again, as with anything, there are all kinds of images of all kinds of things. In all of these avenues. So just in the same way that you would be cautious in a Google image search, be cautious in these searches as well. But just use these tools wisely. I think a lot of times, maybe even I guess as believers, we should pay a little bit more attention to the legality of what we're doing and perhaps honor that in a way that we haven't in the past. But is there anything more that you want to add to that?
In our show notes, we'll just link you to all three of these places where you can get free photos, and you can just click on that, and it'll take you right to the sites that we're talking about.
Yep. And especially, like, I know if you go on a lot of very popular blogs, most of them, and any blogger will tell you that having pictures in your blog post is the way to go, because with the picture you can put a description. In WordPress you can put a description that helps you with search rankings and stuff like that. So I use the stock exchange. That's where I get most of my pictures, and that's why my blog is
we do that too on our blog, and it's amazing how many hits we get from people. We have this image from way back when we first started. We talked about this guy who was in a tanning bed, and the tanning bed caught on fire.
Yeah,
and I photoshopped this picture of a tanning bed with this sunburnt guy and fire that I'd all found and all these things and put it together. That one gets so many hits on our blog. People get that. And then we have another one where I don't remember what it was, but it was some story about somebody who did a death threat on Twitter and went out and shot somebody. And we're talking about can social networks become violent? And I have this picture of this Twitter bird carrying carrying a handgun under its wing, and for some reason I've gotten emails on that one multiple times. People saying, "Hey, can we use your Twitter bird picture in my presentation?" And I'm like, "Yeah, go for it." So that's great.
All right, well, let's move on to They Said It.
Read my.
I clicked the button wrong. Let's start over with They Said It.
Read my lips.
I'm going to say this again.
I've never taken steroids or HGH.
I took the initiative in creating the internet.
The Macintosh, of all the machines I've ever seen, is the only one that meets that standard.
I'm not a crook.
If you know what you're doing here, slide out.
God's law comes before man's law. They're just going to have to bring me to jail. Rosa Toussaint-Ortiz, a 52-year-old chaplain responding to Alabama's new immigration law, which declares that the state will file misdemeanor or felony charges against anyone who harbors, transports, shelters, or shields an illegal immigrant. Rosa weekly transports illegal immigrants to church. Source, The Daily.
People in the rural areas of this country who are Christian conservative culturally, you can say backward if you want, don't like this kind of stuff. Chris Matthew on his show Hardball, making observations about how Christians react toward the behavior of men like Congressman Weiner. Source, Newsbusters.
Even now, after 65 years, the murder should be strongly condemned. It is a case of vigilantism and is unacceptable. Mayor Henry Lenfrank explaining that a 96-year-old woman has confessed to a murder in the Netherlands that had previously gone unsolved for 65 years. Source, Associated Press.
They've ignored our calls, ignored our letters. Legally, this is the next step to get my clients compensated. As a foreclosure defense attorney, this is sweet justice. Attorney Todd Allen, who represents the Nyergers, who were taken to court by Bank of America alleging that the couple defaulted on a home loan. The Nyergers proved it was a bank error. They paid cash for their home and never had a mortgage on the property. After Bank of America refused to pay for the Nyergers' court costs as ordered by the judge, Attorney Todd Allen foreclosed on the Bank of America. Source, DigiTriad.
All right, let's jump up to Steve's story. Steve, this is something that has been a concern. You brought it up before, that some of the immigration legislation we're seeing here in the South really begins to fly in the face of the gospel.
Well, it does, and this is something that, as the Immigration Roundtable that you were a participant in, one of the presenters in Sunday night at our church for the whole district, you all very well presented the case that our founders would be they would be horrified to see our nonchalant attitude toward what is happening to illegal immigrants, or as Scripture calls them, the stranger, the foreigner that is in our land. Foreigners or strangers are one of 4 special categories that God carves out and says that he takes a special interest in, and a special offense to those who oppress them, mistreat them, or fail to show them Christian hospitality. The others are the poor, the widows, and the orphans.
Right.
So it's not optional. I'm proud of the Alabama United Methodists. Bishop Williman has written a letter, and I don't know if he's written it, but he's endorsed the letter that's been written, and clergy are signing on. It's not an official United Methodist pronouncement. They haven't sat in conference to make such a pronouncement, but the clergy are signing almost unanimously this document saying that we must and we will disobey the provisions of this, and they've pointed out very reasonably that this is not in the state's economic best interest. It's not in the state's relations, interracial relationships and intercultural relationships best interest. I think that it's time the church find its voice on this now.
Yeah.
I did not get to see the Republican debate on Monday night, but I did get to read Newt Gingrich's response about the immigration law, and I thought his response was very good, because he said, we're at a point where we're so extreme that you either legalize everybody or you throw everybody out. Yeah. He said this is a complex issue, and it requires complex discussion and complex answers. Yeah.
And that's been the problem. There's been no comprehensive plan and no real discussion about it.
And this, to me, the Alabama law is completely different than the Arizona law. The Arizona law wouldn't penalize if we're riding in a car and we get pulled over, and I have an illegal immigrant with me. Their license could be checked. They could get in trouble. I wouldn't get in trouble with having them in the car with me. In Alabama, I would get in trouble. Am I correct?
No, you would get in trouble here. Since January 1st, we passed a bill last year in this state that's almost as draconian as the Alabama bill. And you can't take an illegal anywhere unless, I think that the test is not written this way in the law, but the test is if an ambulance would take them to an emergency room, then you can do that. That's the only concession. But you can't take them across town to a doctor's appointment.
You can't take them to church.
That's right.
And that's the point. That when I say it flies in the face of the gospel, we can't even take people to church. If someone is in need of transportation to go to the store, we could be held legally liable, for doing such a thing. Real quick, the quote that Lisa read, this was fascinating. Heath, you sent this. So the problem here is that you have Christians who are kind of backward, and they're the ones to blame for people wanting Congressman Weiner to resign over what he did. Is that the problem? Backwards Christians? We would actually want some kind of standard.
It's our fault. It's our fault. He's sick, Tony. He is a sick man. He is getting.
He's sick.
He is getting the care that he so deserves. This is what I read today. This is will make even madder than all the other stuff. If he quits today, he'll get $37,000 a year in pension from his time in the House.
Let me go back to this thing about whether he quits or doesn't. What disturbs me more than this, and I posted about it on my Facebook this last week and got different kinds of comments. I really don't care. I'm libertarian, so I can say about anything I want and offend somebody.
Ron Paul 2012.
No, not Ron Paul. I said I was libertarian. I didn't say I was brain damaged.
Oh, no.
Oh, man. Oh, man.
Okay. At any rate, let me now clear the deck and go back to what I was going to say. What bothers me is more than the fact that he won't resign is that something like 56, 57% of his constituents say he should remain in office. Yeah. He's doing a good job. Right. And they support him all the way, despite this. Pogo, the old cartoon that's no longer, I don't think it's in vogue anymore, even being produced anymore. Pogo had a cartoon when I was a kid, said, "We have met the enemy and he is us." And our founders, the founders of this nation, they saved us from tyranny. They gave us the strongest possible form of government that's ever been seen on the face of the earth. They saved us from everything but ourselves. And now we've slumped into this moral and intellectual funk where to be asked to perform the labor of thinking for yourself is just too much. We'll have the government do that for us in a welfare way too. And I'm not talking about people on welfare here. I'm talking about people like us.
Right. No. The citizenry of the country.
If we were to stand up and say, no, we're not going to put up with all this. I mean, from the TSA.
That's your truth.
Okay, listen. All right,
listening.
This just came up that Representative Weiner's wife has just come home from her trip with, and new images have emerged of the congressman cross-dressing and getting oiled up.
I will not. Let me go on record.
And you heard it here.
Let me go on record as saying that I will not willingly, with my consent, see those pictures.
No, well, don't go through the checkout because from this article it looks like it's on the cover of the National Enquirer.
Oh, there we go. There's a great source. I want to get to the last story. We're going to run a little bit over today. Just real quick on these other two stories. Encourage you to check them out. This one of the 96-year-old who confessed to the murder. It's tragic because she killed a gentleman who she thought was sympathetic to Nazis. So she did this 65 years ago, only to find out that he saved Jews, and he was a friend of Jews. But I mean, she's 96 now. She's finally confessed. What do you do? And then this one that Heath read. This is so cool. Check it out. There's a video that we link you to on this one. And I mean, they foreclosed on the Bank of America, and the bank president is like, whoa,
But like within an hour, they cut him a check.
They did. They cut him a check, yeah. And the judge said, hey, you have to pay the court costs to the Nigers because they've proved that they're innocent. And for 6 months, the bank refused to pay. And he went with the police officers, and they said, and the lawyer said, I want you to empty the drawers. I mean, just everything. Whoa.
Yeah.
This last story, we usually do something that's funny, interesting. This one is interesting in a different way. There's a twist at the end of this. It's a 5-minute video, and again, just a great little twist in the last minute of this. It's about a flying car. Let's watch this or listen to it. Here it goes.
The Maverick is a flying car. That means that it's primarily a car, but it flies. There have been flying cars tried before, but everybody kept saying, yeah, they fly, but they really don't drive. So we drove the Maverick from Central Florida down Dunellen by Ocala, south of Gainesville, all the way up here to Oshkosh. Reactions from people every time we stopped. I mean, a fuel stop took us minimum of an hour because people had just come out of the woodwork, stopping. Nobody was moving through the gas stations because they've just never seen a propeller on a car. But I think everybody has been in a traffic jam and thought, man, if this thing would just fly. So they see this and they do a double take. Wait a minute, is that what I've been dreaming about? Yeah, it is. It flies.
First flying car I've ever seen, actually.
I love it.
Me too.
So how does it actually take off, though? I mean,
the wing is right up here.
yeah.
You unzip that. It's got a spar. We've got a mast. We took the mast off. The mast goes up 27 feet, pulls the wing up, hit 40 miles an hour, and it takes off.
Really?
You steer it in the air with the steering wheel just like you do on the ground. You accelerate in the air, you go up, you decelerate, you come down. So when you want to land, you line it up with where you want to land, decelerate, let it come down. Just before you hit, you just accelerate a little bit, land, stow the chute, and off you go. And anybody that can drive an automatic transmission car can fly it.
It's almost like Wright Brothers wing warping?
Yeah, it's exactly.
Oh yeah, it's like you fly a parachute.
It's like the Wright Brothers.
You pull down one side of the parachute, it turns.
Exactly.
Or you pull down the rear end of both, and then it flares to land.
Yeah, right.
When you're flying it, the pole stays up. I know it's up there to hold the chute open enough.
But it's not structural in flight.
In flight.
No, in flight it's not structural. But we leave it up now. You could pull it down, but you know, at 40 miles an hour, the drag isn't that big. And by having it up, you can make multiple landings and takeoffs, and you can handle crosswinds, which you can't do if you don't have a chute deployment system.
Okay.
The Maverick has one engine and two drive systems. You can shift it right back by the propeller. You shift it either into propeller drive or into transaxle drive. Transaxle drive would obviously be for driving it on the ground. And the propeller has three uses: when you're flying, when you're on the water with pontoons, or when you're on the ice and snow. It'll really go. Okay, now take a guess. 0 to 60, how long?
Oh, with that little engine, 20 seconds.
3.9 seconds.
You're kidding.
I'm not kidding. Now it's relatively slow in flight, unless of course the alternative is sitting in traffic jam. 40 miles
slow?
40 miles an hour in the air.
Well, I would take 40 miles an hour on a traffic jam
But
day
now
times.
on the road, it really goes. We don't know how fast yet, but we know it's more than 95 miles an hour.
What kind of gas mileage you get?
25 to 30
Wow.
on the highway.
That's fantastic.
Is the FAA ever going to let you do this outside of an airport, or you're always going to have to land and take off at airports?
No, helicopters. I mean, if you have a field, you can land in your field. It doesn't make it an airport.
What is your landing distance?
Landing and takeoff is both the same. Let's put it this way: a football field, and you can clear the stanchions.
Yeah.
You know, this vehicle can be used for border patrol, for pipeline flying, for looking for oil slicks out in the Gulf, put it on pontoons, search and rescue it, fly to Walmart when the traffic is heavy. But our primary intention for this, and the reason that we've spent the years that we have developing it, is in places where there are no doctors, there are no nurses, there's no hospital. If you get sick, you will die. My dad was one of the first pilots with Mission Aviation Fellowship, but he was killed when I was a little boy down in the jungles along with 4 friends, and then the tribe that killed him adopted me. So I grew up down there and
in the Brazilian jungles.
Ecuador.
I mean,
yeah.
Jim
Elliott.
Jim Elliott.
Nate Saint. Nate Saint was my dad.
Wow, I'm honored to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
Wow.
So it was the Waorani, it was the people that killed my dad that told me, hey, we need to be able to fly. They call it the able bia, the would-be thing. We have big jungle would-bees that sound like an airplane when they're flying, so they call this the would-be. What we want to do is we want to develop a commercial market and sell it to people up here for whatever they want to do with it, so that we can get the quantity up, so that we can get the cost down, so that we can serve the humanitarian missions market that is our primary market.
That is neat. Try to get me one with I always wanted to fly.
There it is. It's a great twist at the end of that.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, this ties into the whole Jim Elliot story, and their end goal is to produce these things and get them in the hands of missionaries so they can land and drive around in areas.
Pastors.
Yeah.
Fleeing board meetings. You know?
So out in the Dakota
Follow
district,
me
you
now.
use something like this, where you got Montana, North, South Dakota, and Wyoming, and Alaska.
There you
This would
go.
be perfect. For
There
the
you
pastor.
go.
You could drive to district, fly to district.
Hey,
conference
guess
and
what,
stuff.
guys? We've got a voicemail.
Woo!
I know,
Wow.
this never happens.
Yeah, let's listen to
Somebody
it.
got trapped in a phone booth or what?
Technology guys, this is Gary from the Belvedere Assembly Plant. I wanted to call you and tell you thank you for the shout out you gave to us a little while back, and hey, just want to tell you guys I like the show, and if you want to keep going with it, that's pretty cool. Hey, one thing I like about it is I like how you guys, somebody else, something that I'll kind of disagree with, kind of start thinking to myself some responses I want to make, and then all of a sudden somebody else will start disagreeing with the one person, and you guys will banter back and forth, and all my arguments be made. And so I guess it is kind of user antagonistic, but then it answers the user's antagonism. So that's pretty cool. Thanks, guys. Enjoy.
See, I was, let's give away our secret. We can read the mind of our listeners, and so
we choose not to read some of their minds.
Hey, Gary, thanks so much. We encourage other people to give us a call.
Yes, we do.
Yeah, we want to hear your comments. A few weeks ago, we told you that we had to cancel our show on the whole bioethics issue because the medical doctor that was going to be a part of that show, his wife was struggling with cancer, and she has since died. Got an email from him this week saying that they're moving on, and they're just a wonderful celebration of her life, and so he wants us to reschedule, so that's going to be coming up. But our prayers continue to go out to Bob and his family, and as they just now just deal with the loss of his wife. On our upcoming shows next week, we have Tom Clegg with us. We'll be discussing both of his books, and he's really talking about just reaching lost generation here in the United States. On the 29th, Chris Conrad will be with us, and he'll be talking to us about church planting, church multiplication, evangelism. He's the district superintendent for the West Michigan district of the Wesleyan Church. August the 3rd, author, teacher, preacher, professor, Dr. Bob Weitzel will be with us. He'll be discussing his book, Waypoints.
I like him.
Yeah.
Great. I like him. I sat in his session at the gathering. I like Dr. Weitzel.
Yeah, we're really looking forward to that. Heath's working on some things as well. We need to get going. We have mentioned before kind of a partnership we've got with Wesleyan Publishing House, and we'll begin to interview authors, and Wesleyan Publishing House will be giving away a copy of their book every time we have an author on. And so right now, to be honest, the ball's in our court on that. We just need to move on and begin to talk with authors and get them scheduled. Lisa, want to thank you once again for being with us today.
You're welcome.
Very gracious participant.
Con mucho gusto.
Yeah.
That means it's been my pleasure.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We needed that translation.
Yeah. No, Heath, you understood that, right?
Sí. Muy bien.
I wonder if you could share with our listeners a little bit of what we had the privilege. Could you speak a little Southern Spanish for them?
Bueno, es un placer haber estado con ustedes. De verdad, es un gusto.
So good. Oh, Lisa, appreciate you and appreciate everything you do with
Amazing
Christian Camping International.
Yeah.
Again, for those that might be interested, what would be the website that they should access?
If they speak Spanish, they can go to CCI Latin America, which would be ccial.org. And if they want to find out more about Christian camping in the U.S., it's ccca.org.
All right. Well, if you want to do further research on anything we discussed today, you can find all the links to the stories we covered at our website, thetechologyshow.com. If you want to contact us, send your emails to thetechologyshow@gmail.com or leave us a voicemail like Gary did. Just call us at 3049-THEOLOGY. That's 304-986-5449. Leave a message, and we may even play your comments on the air. As always, thanks for joining us. Goodbye, everybody.
Goodbye.
Adios.
Adios.
Nice.